The wind that rolled across the hills that night carried with it the scent of rain and something darker, an omen, perhaps, or just the bitter memory of what had been lost. In the old Caldwell mansion, perched like a ghost above the sleepy town of Mercer's Hollow, two siblings sat in silence, each measuring the other across a dining table that had once been a symbol of their family's success. Now it was a battlefield. Evelyn Caldwell had always been the golden child, refined, educated, the heir apparent to her father's empire of steel and construction. Her brother, Marcus, was the black sheep, the reckless son who gambled away trust funds and ran his own company into the ground before crawling back, pleading for help. Their father, Charles Caldwell, had died 6 months ago, and with his death came the reading of the will that split the family in two. It wasn't the money that ruined them, it was the insult. Charles had left the controlling shares of Caldwell Industries to Evelyn, while Marcus received only a fraction of the inheritance, enough to keep him comfortable but never powerful. The decision was deliberate, a judgment passed even from the grave. Evelyn had tried to be gracious, to console him with promises of inclusion, but Marcus's pride was a beast she could never soothe. At first, he drank. Then he disappeared. And when he came back, he smiled too easily. His charm was the kind that cut deeper than his anger ever could. He started showing up at board meetings uninvited, whispered to investors behind Evelyn's back, spun stories of mismanagement and betrayal. The company wobbled. Her father's old partners grew suspicious. Evelyn, already burdened with grief and responsibility, began to unravel. The night it began to truly fall apart, she found a note slipped under her office door, a photograph of her father's signature, crudely forged on a will that transferred full ownership of the company to Marcus. The implication was clear. Someone was trying to make it look real. Someone was planning something. Evelyn confronted him in the mansion that night, rain hammering the windows, lightning flashing across the ancestral portraits that watched in silence. "You think you can erase me?" she asked, her voice trembling but sharp. "You think you can steal what you couldn't earn?" Marcus laughed softly, the kind of laugh that came from a man who believed himself already victorious. "Father owed me this. You think I don't know how you whispered in his ear, turned him against me? He was ready to give me control before you poisoned him with your sweet little manipulations." Her hand clenched around the edge of the table. "He left you everything you deserved. Everything I deserved?" His voice broke into fury. "He left me scraps. You always get the glory. You always get the sympathy. Well, sister, sympathy won't save you." The argument ended not with a shout, but with silence, an awful, seething silence that settled like dust in the corners of the house. After that night, Evelyn began receiving threats. Anonymous letters. Car brakes cut. A shadow following her home. She told the police, but there was no proof. Marcus denied everything, his face a mask of wounded innocence. Then came the accident, or what the papers called an accident. Evelyn's assistant, Clara, was found dead in Evelyn's car, driven off a cliff on a stormy night. The police suspected mistaken identity. Evelyn suspected something far worse. The grief was a knife twisting in her chest, but it also carved away her hesitation. If Marcus wanted war, she would give him one. She hired her own investigator, a quiet man named Lang, who'd once worked for her father. Lang dug deep into Marcus's debts, his associates, his calls. What he found chilled Evelyn to the bone. Marcus had been meeting with a man named Adrian Holt, a known fixer with a reputation for making problems disappear. Holt's price was high, but Marcus had recently come into a suspicious amount of cash after liquidating one of the family's smaller holdings, without board approval. It took weeks for the plan to form in Evelyn's mind, and when it did, it frightened even her. But vengeance, once it finds a home in the heart, grows roots too deep to dig out. She decided not to fight Marcus through lawyers or press statements. She decided to end it quietly, permanently. Lang arranged for Holt to receive a message, one that seemed to come from Marcus himself. The message offered twice the original payment for the same job. The target was Marcus. Evelyn didn't have to forge his signature. Holt already had samples. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. 2 nights later, the mansion burned. The official report called it an electrical fire, but Evelyn knew better. They found Marcus's remains in his study, the body almost unrecognizable except for a ring, a family heirloom that had once belonged to their father. Evelyn identified it herself, her face calm, her eyes dry. In the months that followed, she rebuilt. The company stabilized. The board returned. Publicly, she mourned. Privately, she watched the fire play over and over in her mind, feeling nothing, no triumph, no remorse, only a cold certainty that justice had been served. But fate is never content with one act of vengeance. One evening, nearly a year later, Evelyn came home to find a letter waiting for her in the foyer, its seal marked with soot. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, written in a neat, deliberate hand, were the words, "You think you buried me, sister. But blood has a way of surviving fire." Attached was a photograph, Marcus, alive, standing in front of a tropical resort, smiling the same wolfish smile he'd worn that night in the dining room. The note slipped from her fingers. The house seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills, the same sound that had echoed the night it all began. Evelyn realized, too late, that she hadn't destroyed her brother. She had created something worse. The battle for blood and money was far from over. And this time, only one of them would live to tell the tale. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. The letter lay on her desk like a wound that refused to close. The photograph burned into her mind. Marcus alive, it was impossible. She had seen the fire. She had stood beside his coffin. Yet the evidence mocked her. His face in that picture wasn't a ghost's. It was real, alive, and smug, just as she remembered. At dawn, she called Lang. The investigator arrived by noon, his face drawn and skeptical. He examined the photograph under the cold light of the study. "It's not a fake," he said finally. "This was taken recently. The timestamp in the corner, last month. That's a resort in Belize." Evelyn stared out the window, her reflection pale against the glass. He planned this. Even his death was part of it. Lang exhaled. "If that's true, he had help. Someone inside your circle. Someone who made sure you saw what he wanted you to see." Evelyn's fingers curled against the edge of her desk. "Then we find them, all of them." But as days turned into weeks, her confidence began to erode. Little things went wrong. The company's accounts flagged mysterious transactions, clients withdrew, anonymous emails hinted at scandals that had never happened. Someone was pulling strings, and Evelyn could feel her control slipping. She began to see Marcus everywhere, in passing cars, reflected in glass, even in the faces of strangers who looked too long. It wasn't until she received the second letter that she understood the depth of his game. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a memory. Inside the envelope was a copy of an old photograph, she and Marcus as children, standing beside their father in front of the first steel mill Caldwell Industries had ever owned. On the back, scrawled in Marcus's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "You took everything from me once. Now I'll take it all back, slowly, piece by piece, until you know what it feels like to lose yourself." That night, Evelyn locked every door and window in the mansion, but still felt unsafe. Her phone rang at midnight, unknown number. When she answered, only one voice spoke. "You always were too proud to burn with the rest of us." She froze. The line went dead. From that moment, her life became a haunting. Bank accounts drained overnight. Her car sabotaged again. Lang vanished during an investigation trip to Belize, his hotel room found empty except for a half-burned envelope and a ring, Marcus's ring. Evelyn tried to hold on to her sanity, but the walls of her world began to close in. The board called for an emergency audit. Investors demanded explanations. Someone leaked documents to the press, claiming Evelyn had embezzled millions. Her reputation, her company, her father's legacy. Everything was collapsing, just as Marcus had promised. In her desperation, Evelyn made a choice she'd sworn she never would. She reached out to Holt, the same fixer Marcus had once hired. The man met her in a dim bar in the city's old quarter, his expression unreadable. "You thought he was dead," Holt said flatly, stirring his drink. "You should have let me handle it myself." Marcus was clever. Paid off a coroner, swapped a body, disappeared into the storm. "You burned a stranger, Miss Caldwell." Evelyn's voice shook. "Where is he?" Holt smiled faintly. "That's the thing about men like your brother. They don't hide forever. They wait until the pain ripens. Then they strike." Evelyn slid an envelope across the table. "Then make it end. Whatever it costs." Holt looked down at the envelope, then back at her. "You're too late. He's already made his move." 2 days later, the Caldwell mansion went up in flames again. This time, Evelyn barely escaped. As she watched the inferno consume what little was left of her family's empire, she received one final message, an email from an anonymous address. Attached was a video. Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking the ocean, sunlight painting him in gold. "Blood and money, sister," he said with a grin. "That's all it ever was. Father taught us to fight for both. But you forgot one thing. Blood doesn't just bind us. It betrays us. So here's to the empire you built on ashes. By the time this reaches you, everything you own will belong to me. You took my inheritance. I took your soul." The video ended, and Evelyn felt something inside her snap. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked away, from the burning ruins, from the cameras, from the lies. For weeks, she vanished. The media speculated she'd gone mad, that she'd fled the country. Some said she'd drowned herself in guilt. Others whispered that she was plotting her return. Months later, in a quiet coastal town in Italy, a man checked into a small seaside villa. He paid in cash, carried no luggage but a single briefcase, and introduced himself under a false name. That night, as he poured a drink, the door creaked open behind him. "Hello, Marcus," came a voice he hadn't heard in nearly a year. He turned, eyes widening. Evelyn stood there, a pistol steady in her hand, her face pale but calm. "You wanted me to lose everything," she said softly. "Now I have nothing left to lose." For the first time, Marcus's smile faltered. The sound that followed was quiet, just one shot, echoing faintly over the waves. When the authorities found the villa days later, there were 2 glasses on the table, one half empty, one untouched. No bodies. Only the faint scent of gunpowder and sea salt, and a single note scrawled on the wall in ash. "Blood and money," settled at last.